and to make sure that they don't inspire other shooters.
Neda Tawfik there in Buffalo. Thanks very much for that. Let's continue to stay with these issues because Tim Squirrell joins me now. He's head of communications at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue and is a former counter-terrorism advisor to the British government. Tim, welcome here to the programme. We were just playing some of the key bits from Joe Biden's speech a moment or two ago. In terms of combating the obvious threat and the dangers, what is the best way forward?
So there's a few things at play here. One is obviously the gun control piece, which the president has addressed at length and is obviously a perennial issue of debate in the US. But then in addition to that, there's a much more upstream prevention angle to this, which is the question of how can we prevent these mainstreamed extreme conspiracy theories like the Great Replacement theory, which inspired Christchurch, inspired numerous other terror attacks, from continuing to push people or make people feel that they are morally able to engage in extreme violence against sets of people on the basis of effectively lies. So one of the things that America has a real issue with is that kind of prevention. They have a very carceral, securitized system where it's basically either someone is planning an attack and they can be arrested and put in jail, or there's nothing that can be done. So you need to have much more upstream forms of prevention where you try to intervene to disengage people from radicalizing influences, from extreme ideologies and narratives much earlier on. And we know there were missed opportunities in this one. We know that last year there were worries that the shooter was going to do a school shooting and there was very little that was done there. We know that there are numerous touch points where things can be done and currently it's failing to be done.
You make multiple points. Let me try and do it stage by stage, because in terms of combating the narrative, very interesting Neda's take on it, instantly referencing the way that the president talked about politicians needing to play their part. And it was interesting that two Republican senators, Liz Cheney was one of them, calling out on social media her own political party to saying, look, we need to do more on this and stop using some of this language.
Well, politicians and the media are both involved in this. So the Great Replacement theory, which is a conspiracy theory cited by this shooter, as well as Brenton Tarrant, the Christchurch terrorist, is plugged pretty much nightly by Tucker Carlson on Fox News at the moment. New York Times found that he'd cited about 400 times over the course of his cable career on Fox. And so it's not just a problem on the social media platforms. In fact, the story here isn't a failure of social media, but obviously part of this is the online hate component. It's also a problem in the mainstream media and in mainstream politics. So you can see, for example, Matt Gaetz, who's a representative in the US, basically defending Tucker Carlson or plugging Great Replacement theory. And the same goes for Wendy Rogers, who's a prominent Trump supporter.
What about things like the platforms? Joe Biden saying it twice. He live streamed this. Clearly, there was the Christchurch incident. There are worries about copycat. There must be more that the technology companies can do, is there not?
So in this case, the response was actually much swifter from technology companies than in 2019, where the Christchurch shooting was allowed to proliferate disastrously in video form across the internet. In this case, only about 20 people watched it on the service Twitch, and the full video of the shooting doesn't appear to have made its way online. While there is a video circulating and a manifesto circulating, there's been a much swifter response to try to tamp down on that and to try to remove it from mainstream platforms. So while there's still more that can be done, particularly in places that don't speak English, where these things tend to circulate for much longer, the main platforms here aren't the people who failed. Rather, if you look at more fringe platforms like 4chan, where this shooter appears to have claimed to have been radicalized, those are the places which consistently have inspired people to engage in acts of terrorism over a long period of time now. And that's part of the real problem here, is that these places don't want to be moderated, they don't want to change, and without legal regulation, there's very little that can be done.
Tim Squirrell, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Fascinating. Thank you very much for joining us here on BBC News.